I'm sure you've all seen The Power of the Myth, interviews with Bill Moyers and Campbell. And you might remember that he discusses Nietzsche's parable there of the three metamorphoses of the spirit. And Nietzsche has this idea that the human spirit goes through these three main transformations. And initially the spirit becomes a camel, becomes like a camel. And the camel says, you know, load things onto my back. And this is to do, I think, with the assimilating the social cultural values, taking on learning, taking on knowledge, assimilating everything that one can from one's culture. And so this is the camel phase of life. And then the greater the load the camel can take, then the stronger the lion, which is the next phase. The camel metamorphosizes into the lion. The lion, according to Nietzsche, roars a sacred no. The lion roars a sacred no. And the lion represents kind of an instinctually powered individualism. It's the empowerment of the ego to its fullest. Saying no to life, no to everything that the culture offers, no to all the paths that are laid before us, no to a conventional existence, no to religious values. For Nietzsche, it's no to everything. So the lion confronts a dragon. The dragon is called Thou Shalt in Nietzsche's parable. Dragon Thou Shalt with 1,000 scales, with Thou Shalt inscribed on each scale. The purpose of the lion is to defeat the dragon called Thou Shalt. So the Thou Shalt are the morality by which we live, you know, the rules by which we live, that, you know, we've got to be good and well behaved, or we've got to conform to a certain set of values. And Campbell makes a point that this could be like, you know, something we read in the newspaper that day that we feel, oh, you know, maybe I need to be more like that, or it could be something really deep rooted, like a biblical commandment. You know, anything that oppresses the free expression, creative expression of the individual is a Thou Shalt. So the lion battles the dragon, and its purpose is to grow free of all these kind of moral prohibitions. If that happens, then the third transformation is from a lion into a child. And for Nietzsche, the child is this spontaneous, playful existence. And the child is the sacred yes. The lion is the sacred no. The child is the sacred yes. So I think the journey of individuation, the journey of the hero's journey, the hero's adventure, is from the sacred no to the sacred yes. How does that happen? I mean, Nietzsche, I think, underestimated how difficult it is to go from a total no response to life to a total affirmation of life. That's a difficult shift. And of course, probably the best known figure of the no response to life would be Darth Vader. Campbell discusses Vader as a mechanical man, someone who's given his or her spiritual essence over to the state or to some kind of secular life role, some kind of mechanized existence where one lives according to reason and rationality and not according to the spontaneity of the heart. So two key aspects, I think, of the hero's adventure are what I call the confrontation with the empire of the ego, obviously making reference to the idea of the empire in Star Wars, overcoming the empire of the ego and taming the beast within. Okay, so these are the two key aspects. On the one hand, we've got to overcome this no response to life, overcome the ego's resistance to life. Now, if you think of Star Wars with the Empire and Palpatine and Darth Vader and all the stormtroopers, that I think is a very good image of like the armored kind of defensive power controlling mechanism that supports the ego. And so you get Luke Skywalker as like the hero who's trying to fire the one shot that will blow up the Empire's Death Star or something like that, or he could be Lord of the Rings, you get Saruman and the kind of the Herod type tyrant figure that is desperately trying to control the world, desperately trying to control everything. that is how the ego becomes when one is going through a death-rebirth process. The ego becomes extremely fearful. The defenses of the ego are magnified. They become extreme, and that is the way that they are. We become conscious of them, and the way they are broken down through extremity. So I think, in mythic films, whenever you get a ruling emperor that is desperate to maintain control and crush or oppress all resistance, that is a great symbol of how the ego behaves when we're going through a death-rebirth process. So, on the other hand then, so that's the empire of the ego, and then the other hand then, as the ego is broken open, so the instincts are released. Now, in depth psychology, the unconscious often portrays instincts as animals. Jung, in his alchemical work, shows how the alchemists had they identified a movement from like reptiles, dragons, serpents, through to wild beasts, like a wolf, and then through to ever more human-like animals, mammals, softer mammals, and then birds. There was a kind of this evolution away from a more primitive, bestial kind of animal through to a more civilized form of that. And this, Jung suggests, represents the maturation of the instincts. So animals symbolize the instincts. So again, in many mythic films, you see the hero or the hero's party battling against it could be the Kraken or a Gorgon or some kind of ferocious animal beast kind of creature that could be seen as a symbol of the titanic power of the instincts that has been suddenly released into consciousness. So this, I think, is the essence of the underworld descent. That the hero goes down into the depths of the underworld and there has to confront all these forces, the uncivilized forces that lie in the depths of the psyche. I think a scene that really conveys this rather well is the Mines of Moria scene in The Lord of the Rings, the very first Lord of the Rings film. The travelling party, Frodo and Gandalf and Aragorn, are trying to go up the mountain pass to take the high road. They think that's going to be the best bet. And then I think it's Saruman, the evil sorcerer, conjures up some blizzard, some storm that drives them back from the high mountain pass. And I think there's a symbolism there too. It's the idea that we would like always to ascend, always to go on an upward spiritual path towards ever greater divinity. And this is like Dante's idea of, that Dante wants to go straight to heaven. And he wants to just climb the mount of heaven, but he can't. He's driven back by a lion, by a she-wolf, by a leopard. So he's forced to go into an underworld descent, down into hell, and then up the Mount of Purgatory, and eventually to heaven. Well, the same idea, I think, is suggested in the Mines of Moria scene in The Lord of the Rings, where the party are driven back by the elemental power of the blizzard, i.e. the unconscious, and then are forced to go down an underworld descent into the Mines of Moria. And that scene there, it's really, I think, it does a great job of conveying the incessant quality of what it's like when one is confronting the powers of the unconscious. It's just like one drive comes up, one passion comes up, one fear comes up after another, and it's just a constant, incessant struggle. And you can see this if you read Jung's own confrontation with the unconscious, that he experienced, like, he was underground and there were crashing rocks all around him, and it was just a time of extreme tension. Yet he said that he felt that he was possessed by a demonic strength, and that helped him prevail in this underworld experience. And Nietzsche too, his experience was very much like that. He said that he'd been through 1,000 heartbreaking last hours, and there's this intensity of the struggle between the old ego and the instincts. And this is the essence of the descent into the underworld phase. Well, should we take a break there, and then I can resume when we go back. There's quite a lot to take in. Thank you for your attention. Okay, so I just want to say a few more things about the hero's journey, and then I'm going to get on to archetypal astrology to try and confuse you a little bit more with that. So, can you think of the 1960s Jason and the Argonauts film? I mean, it's a bit of a classic. It's
Great movie.
Is it Harryhausen did the special effects?
Yeah.
He died recently, right? He died.
It's a great movie.
And I've got a little boy who's now 5. But I think when he was about 3.5, somehow he managed to get into watching Jason and the Argonauts. And I used to watch it every day. I like the film, but I don't like it that much. I've got to say.
I thought of it when you were speaking earlier. That was the film that came to my mind when you were speaking.
Yeah. I mean, it's
Jason and the Argonauts.
It's a classic. It really. And there's one. I mean, there's many great scenes there. But there's one scene I think that is really illustrative of a major experience in the death-rebirth process that takes place during individuation. And can you think then when Jason is leading the Argo through the clashing rocks? I mean, it's a classic scene. And they follow another boat. The first boat goes through, the rocks start to shake, and then the boulders form, totally destroy the first boat. And then Jason, putting his faith in the gods, gives the command, sail the Argo through. And so they sail the Argo through, and lo and behold, the rocks start crumbling again, the boulders splash into the water, and the waves are whipping up onto the sea, and it seems like they're doomed. And then I think in the film, at least, I think it's different from the myth, that Jason rips off an amulet that he's been given, throws the amulet into the water, and then Triton, the sea god Triton, emerges and holds the rocks together, and the boat can pass safely through the other side. Now that, I think, is... I mean, there's so much symbolism in that scene. I mean, you can think of the crashing rocks as the crumbling structure of the ego. The ego structure starts to crumble, and what happens then? The instinct activated. The boulders crash into the water, whips up the water, the symbol of the unconscious, so that the boat is getting tossed around by the instincts of the unconscious that are being activated because the ego structure is crumbling. And then, Campbell talks about supernatural aid, that there seems to be some kind of transcendent principle or deep wisdom in the psyche that can guide us through this process. And I think that the sea god Triton is a symbol of that. Because when one is going through a death-rebirth process, you can have the sense of almost being pushed, like your inner being is being pushed through a narrow passageway, pushed through the opposites, and the inner being moves out of the old structure of the ego into a fuller psychic reality. And this happens again and again and again. And I just think that scene really, it really shows well that passage through the opposites. There's another variation on that is in The Matrix. The scene where Neo has the chance to, you can take a red pill, or is it red or green pill? Red pill or green pill. And the green pill will wipe his memory and he'll go back to his old life and it's all done. And the red pill, he's going to see the truth, he's going to, whatever that is. And of course, luckily for the film, he chooses the red pill. And but then he goes through something like this, a death-rebirth process, where he's getting pushed through all this gungy stuff, and then he emerges in this underground world, this underground civilization. It's like his old egoic, worldly identity has been stripped away, and he gets to discover the truth. So that's a more modern rendering, I think, of a similar idea, that you struggle against the resistances of the ego, you struggle to control the instincts and work with the instincts, and as you do that, there's this progressive movement from the more narrow, contained existence in the ego to a fuller psychological reality. And it can feel like a birth, a death, rebirth. Stanislav Grof, transpersonal psychologist, has written a lot about this, and perinatal psychology, that one can actually relive birth, and that can be a catalyst for psychospiritual rebirth. The two experiences are archetypally, thematically connected. So in reliving one's own birth in altered states of consciousness, in Grofian therapy, that can be the trigger for a spiritual, the second birth, the spiritual rebirth.